Hi everyone, and welcome to the Dynatrace office hours. And today's topic is data to dashboards. And I'm Sini from Dynatrace, part of the Dynatrace platform enablement team. And together with Thomas, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Okay, Thomas, PM for dashboarding at the moment, and you already know my most favorite ice cream. Back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So maybe you can jump on the next slide. So what can you expect in today's session? First, we want to show you how we do discovering, exploring data with dashboards and with the new dashboards app. And we will show you how you can make the transition from Dashboards Classic to the new Dashboards app. And both those things in a hands-on way. And thanks, Thomas, for preparing that. But maybe let's ask the first questions. The first question I hear really often from our internal users, from customers. So what is the difference between notebooks and dashboards?
I'm super lucky as we figured out in the preparation, because only today we actually updated the docs. So let me go out for a second and try to shift over side. And since from today onward, we actually merged these two because of exactly that question. And as you can see, the very first tile that you will see on this new docs page is exactly the question. And if we click in, then what we provide you with is a simple bullet list on both sides where we see either or, but actually and. That's what I want to highlight here in particular, how you can use them, where we see their strengths. And I will also then show you in the hands-on part a bit how you can connect those two in a meaningful way. Coming back. Did that
And maybe
answer?
just
Did it
an
answer your
information.
question? Not that, no, it didn't, but let me give you the very too long to read. So notebooks, what you will find there is mainly, because we see here discover and explore, another term that is missing here, but which will you find on the docs page is explore versus observe. And notebooks would definitely fall into this first bucket, which is exploring. So when you want to first start to actually explore your data, when you want to prototype with even external data using serverless functions, etc., then you would start off usually with notebooks because it has this sequential layout and it uses all the available space. So you also have lots of space for your queries in case you use TQL or also for the builder. And data is front and center there. And once you're done, usually, once you find a meaningful piece, something interesting, then it's with intents, it's actually quite easy to move over into the second bucket, which is this observe. So once you have the data, you usually want to observe it over time. That's the whole idea about observability. And this is where then dashboards would naturally come in, where you see data in real time and yeah, where you can put it in context in a multi-dimensional layout rather than just in a sequence, which is more like this ad hoc analytics versus this constant observation over time in context. Does that kind of make sense, Sini?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And just for information for our audience, so if there are any questions, please feel free to use our Q&A feature in Zoom and ask any questions. At the end of the session, as you see, we have a reserved spot dedicated for your questions about dashboards.
Awesome.
Yeah, so can you maybe show us now how you can discover and explore data with some examples?
Just two boring slides before that. And the text is not so important. What's important is the journey here, which is in essence 5 parts. And you will see the same then on the dashboard as well, just so you get some context also to the hands-on part. And usually when you think about creating dashboards, which is mainly the blue parts, then you usually at the very first asking yourself, what kind of data is there? What kind of data do I want to use or leverage? How can I explore this data in order to get to such meaningful observations? And then once you have something as a result, be it with TQL, with Copilot, or also with explore sections and tiles. I will show you in a sec. Then you usually dive into selecting the visualization type that is best suited to the data. And you set up your visualization. It means basic visualization settings such as units or thresholds or similar. And then you usually want to, at some point, once you have the first visualization or a few visualizations there representing your results, then you usually want to contextualize it, be it with Markdown or be it with even external data. And this is where I want to focus today on, which is in particular code tiles, so that you can not just show data stored in Grail, which is hopefully and usually the first and the most important data storage that you're going to use, but that sometimes you also have interesting data outside that you want to join with this, with any such data stored in Grail, and then you can use code tiles in order to do that, and we'll quickly show this today. And then last but not least, to go full circle, once you have visualizations there, once you have context there, be it again Markdown text or images or external data, then you usually want to make it dynamic. And this should be all that you need to know today in order to be able to follow easily. And just one more, because we said discover and explore. I think this is something I already want to mention now so that it's easy to follow. In essence, if we stay with Grail and don't go beyond yet with external data and ad hoc functions, the means to actually get it in, then there's 3 main ways today that I also already showed at breakouts that perform this year, how to get to data. One being the Explore UI, which you can find in both dashboards and notebooks. The second is something you already had from day one, which is using DQL. And last but not least, you have Copilot, which complements both of these 2 ways of exploring and discovering and exploring your data. All right, and that I already showed you what's the difference. So we could actually, if you want to, already dive into the hands-on part. So sounds right, Sini?
Yeah, let's do some hands-on stuff.
Any questions at this point from your side?
I don't see any questions yet in our Q&A, but we haven't started with the examples.
Sure. Okay. So discovering and exploring, let's start with the basics. Usually when you explore any kind of data being on a website, then there's usually 2 ways. One is the classic, I search something, and the other is usually via category trees, think of Amazon, or in our case, via apps and via menu items in these apps. So the first one that I mentioned, which already works with metrics, and for this you would use a search term. So first metrics, you can already do this in our global search as of today, and then simply type Kubernetes, for instance, which would give you all the respective metrics. So search, tick mark, and that in the global one.
Maybe Thomas, just a question. So how did you find this search bar? So what did you do to find the search bar?
One. I think in most of the fancy new tools, you usually would use Control or Command K, like with Slack, for instance, in order to get into this. Same for Atlassian if you are software developers. And once you're here, you have actually 2 ways. Either you quickly go into the metric, which would be just hitting it, or another would be with being a bit more flexible, is to actually open the intent viewer first. So instead of directly going to notebooks, which is again the tool of our choice for exploration, which would happen if you just clicked it, you can also be more flexible and open the intent viewer, and then you can decide for yourself where to put this metric and then start off there. Let's actually still go to notebooks and do this for a second. And you see, you already start off in notebooks. You already get, in that case, an explore section, which lets you now explore this metric via the UI. But let's actually stick with the dashboard that I've shown you and go back to our predefined tool. And let's look at how you would go about doing the reverse. So instead of starting with search, let's actually start with dashboards, for instance, and then use the tools that are baked into the app, which in that case, usually let's actually start with a fresh dashboard for the sake of it. And you see you start empty, and the highlighted button here is the plus button to add something. And then the very first thing you already see is this first mean that I described before, which is exploring logs and metrics as the first 2 data types with the UI. And then the second mean or approach to to discover and explore your data would be DQL and querying Grail. And then last but not least, I mentioned this before, is to actually start off with code and serverless functions in order to query external data. But more in a second. Let's go back to the office hour. And that should actually get you started to find data in Dynatrace. Any questions, Sini? Or
any questions? Not yet. Yeah, maybe one question. Yeah. So I see you can, so basically with those explore components, you can explore any kind of metrics which are available in Grail.
yes.
And for your environment. So if a metric is not available in your environment, or if there's no data, it also won't pop up, right?
Yep.
Awesome. So it's basically contextualized. So those UI components are contextualized, and they will just show you those kind of metrics which are available for you.
Yes, exactly.
Nice.
Okay, so you now, I guess, know where to find data. Let's actually look at more real life / examples. In the case of this first way that I showed, which is the explore sections, and let's start quickly with logs. Here, for instance, we have different kinds of visualizations, one being in essence, the raw log lines, one being a breakdown and an aggregate of the log lines, one being over time, as you can see. And let's quickly go in and see what we are actually using in here. So what you can do in this for logs, for instance, is you can either use filters or comments, filters being all the columns in the log lines, for which you can slice and dice it and narrow it down, or you can already use predefined fields such as the status in order to filter for them. Or you could also add comments such as summarize in order to generate exactly that breakdown, which then says, please count all my log lines by status, which will then give you pretty much the same as with DQL where you say summarize.
Question comes there. I see there are plus if you go back to the chart, so I could summarize or group the data by multiple fields or columns.
Go back and
I see here a plus, and I guess, yeah, so I can group or summarize the data by additional fields.
no, right now you can only do this for once, since it's covering the most basic cases. If you want to do that, then it would be, and I know probably would ask me later, but I show it anyways now. You can then easily go here and then resort back to DQL, and it would then be as simple as just copy pasting this and replacing this one thing.
I see.
And the rest is already taken care of you. So it should give you a jump start in essence, also then to more complex cases. But I will go back to this in a sec when we are done with metrics and logs. Yeah. And here, for instance, we also do have other comments in order to actually get to a time series format, because this is event-based logs, right? Which is more like an event. And then in order to get this over time, you have a simple function or comment called convert to time series. Once you apply this and you choose by which fields, then that's it. You get the overtime visualization. Similarly to, yeah, here you could also summarize, but then instead of choosing a field, you just choose all records and then you get a single value. Or of course, you can also not do any comments, but instead just show the raw lines, log lines, and then, for instance, use thresholds in order to highlight certain status in such logs. And you get the gist. It should really be this very quick exploration and discovery of your data without needing to know any DQL at the moment. And then once you are familiar with it, you can go further and beyond. But let's also look at metrics maybe at this point, not just at logs. For metrics, I already beforehand showed how you're gonna access or find metrics via the search. Similarly, if you are in the app and you added the explore metrics section, you can do the same in here with a bit more convenience, because as you can see on the left side, you get categories for this already predefined that come with the built-in metrics, and then you can more easily narrow down the field where you're interested in, be it more infrastructure cases where CPU, disk, and memory, etc. are of interest, or Kubernetes. And once you selected it, you can then do the classic things that you used to be able to with Data Explorer and Dashboards Classic. You can aggregate, you can split by, and you can do, as of 289, quite more. For instance, you can again convert to a rate. You can also convert to a single value, which is important because you now, once you use time series, you always get returned to time series format. But how do you go back to one number, right? This is where convert to value would come in, or default values, which is replacing empty values such as null, or compared to previous period, which is in essence the equivalent of the previous time shift comment that we used to have, which then simply lets you pick the shift that you want to apply, and then you can go back. For instance, you could do this because I'm on this, and then the time would already be shifted by 2 days, and this way you can easily compare these 2 points in time. Yeah. And you can see, for instance, here an example of convert to value where applying that would then give us the same as with DQL, actually doing this with adds field command. So instead of knowing all this, which would have been something along these lines of adding a field, knowing that you need an array average function, with the builder you can now simply, instead of knowing all this, just say convert to value, pick what kind of aggregation you're actually interested in.
So you have to choose the kind of aggregation function. So is it the average, the first or the last value?
Exactly.
Okay.
For the ones who were very knowledgeable or used Data Explorer quite a bit, we used to call this fold in the past. And this way now you can do in essence the same. Also here. Yes. And that's it for metrics. And of course you can do fancy things like adding icons, doing colors, and all the things you would expect.
I see we got already quite some questions in, which are not really related now for what you're presenting, but we will cover them at the end. I'm just scrolling through them. Yeah, maybe let's proceed. Then we will cover the questions already asked.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so maybe one thing. So what you're doing now basically is slice and dice. So nothing, no customization, no DQL query entering. And I guess there's also a way how you can do some more advanced queries or queries just with DQL.
Yes, sure. Just on a side note, because again, this has been there in essence from day one. I don't want to go into too much detail because I think Peter is way better at this. But whenever there's a data type such as events that is not yet available as a explore sectional tile, then you could, of course, go back to good old DQL, or in cases, and I think for this it's mainly intended then in general, would be when you actually start to use more complex comments and cover more complex use cases, such as joining data, for instance, your interest in how does a CPU do over time, when there's also logs with errors, for instance. You could easily do this by joining time series here with logs, for example. Or I think you mentioned the Cini, what if I have Kubernetes events? How does this affect, for instance, and correlate with errors in my logs? And then you see you can start to actually correlate between data types using DQL. And I think this is exactly what we build it for, to break the silos of these data types and actually make them work together in order to answer complex and important questions.
Thanks, Thomas. Yeah, and what else did I want to ask to that section? Maybe, yeah, you can show us how you would we're not yet there, but how you would navigate to notebooks from dashboards, from dashboards to notebooks.
Sure.
The other way.
This pretty much the same way as I've showed you before from the search. So I think almost seamlessly have now these concepts called open with or intents, which in essence lets you take all the context with you. So if I wanted to go from here to another app, be it dashboards, notebooks, or even workflows or Kubernetes, then it's as simple as using open with and then deciding on which intent you actually have. So it could be that you want to take over exactly the same explore section that you've seen, or you actually want to, even in this transition, switch over to pure DQL, for instance, or then even choose different comments based on top of it. Think of workflows, for example. But it's then as simple as doing this. Here, for instance, we move over to DQL, and then we would simply run it, and then get pretty much the same. That's, I think, a demo effect that for some reason it doesn't let me show this. But yeah, you get the concept.
Yeah, so this is all working with DQL, but how can you get some external data into dashboards itself? So what if the data is not in DQL?
Question. That's exactly the contextualized part that I said. I mean, you see the markdowns as an example, but of course, to answer your question, you can query external data, in my point of view, relatively easily. All you need to do is to have two things in place. One being that you have allowed the outbound connection. That's a part that your administrator would usually take on or take care of in the settings. And then the second part is you need to know some JavaScript, as you can see here. Not lying about this, but with tools like ChatGPT, it becomes easier and easier these days. For instance, I haven't coded in, I guess, for real in a year or even longer than that. And for instance, to put together this dashboard, I use ChatGPT a lot. And I think it took me not a long time to actually convert, for instance, data when it came in to the format that it's required and stuff like this. It's a matter of providing example and telling ChatGPT, for instance, go from A to B and you're done. And that's pretty much what I did here. For instance, the first part I was asking again, because I can't remember, is give me a simple promise style fetch, which is the classic JavaScript way of fetching data from external resources. And then you usually would use whatever API you have in place. Here, if we, for instance, use a open weather map. So it's an open API to get weather data, for instance, from London, which you then describe in a const, so in a variable in essence in JavaScript, and then you just fill in the gaps. This is what I did. I think I provided 2 or 3 gaps here. The rest was taken care of by ChatGPT. Boom, all there, given that I have asked for allow listing the respective URL. And then I see currently it's 12 degrees Celsius in London. And I could do then more complex things. For instance, here, I can also get forecast data and then visualize it over time. Here I simply said, and you can find examples, by the way, in here. I simply used some of the examples and of the output format, and then just went to ChatGPT, say, hey, this is the format that is expected. This is the format you get from the API. Give me a simple convert function. I placed it, done, boom, I get a time series chart. So before that time, it was relatively complex because you needed true coding skills. Today, even a PM can do it. That's what I'm trying to say here. And I really enjoyed this, by the way, as you can tell by me telling you. A more complex example, which might be more interesting than just fetching weather for you, of course, but I wanted to set the stage, is to actually use Grail together with API data. Here, we, for instance, look at Smartscape data. So we fetch entity. I think in that case, it's process groups, could be host, could be anything. And then you could extend on this. And for instance, based on the uptime, which in our terminology is simply called lifetime, you have a start and an end. And here we, for instance, fetched simple AWS instances pricing per hour, for instance. What you can easily do, and I will show you also the statement in a sec, is you can then say, okay, give me all the entities I have from Grail, give me all the uptime and calculate it, and then please multiply it by a factor, which could be any of these pricing buckets, in order to actually get the true costs. And could be anything, doesn't need to be costs, of course. You could also imagine your booking systems and then, or errors or whatever, in order to calculate business impact. And
so basically, you can combine data stored in Grail and Dynatrace with any kind of external data and visualize it in notebooks.
And you see, it's actually not a lot that I did here. It was really as simple as using the SDKs, then 2 lines in essence, to actually fetch the data from Grail. You could, of course, first start off in notebooks or dashboards to actually construct a query. No need to do this in here and fiddle around. And then at the end, you just copy paste it. In that case, we fetched the host data from hosts, as I said, and we calculated the lifetime, the uptime based on the lifetime values. And this way we got the uptime. And then in a second fetch, as I already said, in a simple form, we went against an API and then we picked the rise pricing range in another line. And then it's as simple as asking again. I did this with ChatGPT because I'm not as good as I used to be. So I just said, hey, please extend this one column and please multiply uptime by the price that I picked. And that's exactly what it's doing here. And then the result is also what you would expect, which is yet another column in your result with the dollar amounts. And you could go wild, of course, like do this by region and similarly.
Nice. So now that we have all the data visualized, how can we make dashboards more dynamic? So they seem now quite static, and I need to always edit the tiles if I want to have a different, do some different kind of slice and dicing. So is there a way how to make it more dynamic?
Yes, sure. To make it dynamic, I guess the ones of you are already using is you know about variables. So that's the icon on top here, or you can also find it in here to add one. Once you would do this, you would get let's make it a bit like this and make this smaller so we can see it more nicely. You would get this with 289, which is, it now comes in the detail view. You give it a name, you choose a type. I will talk about this in a sec. In that case, it's a query. So you run the query and you get the dropdown populated. Here we said, okay, give me your log levels, for instance, and you already see the alert on top as one of them. You can also pick the default value, and then you can also pick whether it should be single or multi-select. This way you create your filters on top, in essence, called variables here, and you can then start to wire them to your tiles. Here, for instance, we have again data from, I think, process groups, and we are interested in certain versions of technologies. And what we could do easily here now is to actually wire them together. Let's go in, and then it's as simple as adding a filter based on the field that you're looking for, and then you place the variable like here, and that's it. And once you do that, you can then actually use it here, for instance, to filter that. Let's actually look for something with 2.1, and you see it's updating, and there's just one process group and one technology SQL connector that actually contains exactly that version. For instance, if you have outdated versions and you want to check them, whether they still exist, this would be a very simple way of doing that instead of going through configuration databases, etc., but using the live data on your systems. And the other classic example, I think, that I've shown already in the builder before and in the explore section is, of course, you do the same in with other variable types such as list or query or SQL or code, and you just place the filter the same way, and then you can use the drop downs on top in order to filter it, for instance. Yeah.
So Thomas, one question. So you showed us this chart about Kubernetes cluster at the bottom, and how can you drill into this Kubernetes cluster? So if you want to navigate to another app, how you can take this context? So if you scroll down, here on it can be, or either on the process group. So on the outdated version I'm looking for. So how can I check some further details out?
It's the same concept as going from dashboards to notebooks or back. It's again open with and intents that then give you the possibility to choose whatever app you want to further your investigation. For instance, here you would then go, for instance, to the host app, or it could be, in the case of Kubernetes, to the new Kubernetes app.
Awesome.
Since you asked for Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And that's it. This way you get everything dynamic, and you don't need to create multiple dashboards for multiple teams or certain technologies, or you get the gist.
Yeah. Thanks. And maybe we can jump to the next topic, and I see already questions related to it. So how can I, as an existing customer who using classic dashboards, move to new dashboards.
Yeah, that should be a quick topic, at least to demonstrate it. Starting, I think, with 285, so it should already be on your environments. Given you are on SaaS, then you should find this upgrade button, both here on the list as well as on the dashboard. If you are on a dashboard by dashboard basis, it's actually also click in so you can see a bit. So this, for instance, is IBM MQ monitoring overview. I think it's one of the extension dashboards. You find the same buttons here as well. If you then hit upgrade, then you should actually get a new dashboard created in the new dashboards app. We already try, as you can see, to persist the layout, and you get the same data as you can tell from what you've seen before. Just the odd dotted line in here and the emojis on top, the links, yeah. And something that also didn't have data in the other dashboard as far as I can remember, where we as well show you no records. That would be on a dashboard by dashboard basis. And also from, let's actually go to Data Explorer, my most beloved tool from the past. You can obviously do the same. So let's start with maybe another example. Doesn't actually matter. It's all Kubernetes. CPU usage. Here we go. As an infrastructure metric where I'm certain that it's already available, because that will probably also be a question. What about service metrics? Then what you will find for quite a while is this open with here as well. And then you can do the same as before, which is going to a dashboard, be it an existing one or be it a new one. And then we try to properly transition exactly that metric configuration, plus also your visualization settings from one to the other.
Nice. Maybe Thomas, you can show also where you can see all the metrics which are already available in Grail on the metrics Explorer.
Sure.
The classic one. Yeah.
So if you go to metrics, then also the same, I think you might have seen in Data Explorer, in both cases and in both places, you have a filter that says, is it available there or not? And this way you can already there narrow down which one you can already visualize also in the dashboards app or in notebooks.
Yeah, so
You sound skeptic.
no, my questions are gone. I see them again.
You can keep it for the Q&A. I've heard there's a Q&A at the end.
Yeah, there's some Q&A. Yeah, I'm just saying if there's any kind of related questions. Note, all good. Yeah, so yeah, the upgrade experience looks really nice. So you don't have to manually recreate the dashboard. You just click the button and the new dashboard opens and new metrics are popping up. And if you further want to adjust the new dashboards, you can do as you like to, right?
Yes, sure. It's just like you manually recreated it. So all up to you what to do next.
Okay. Do you have anything else prepared for us?
No, I think we went full circle. We started off with where can I find data? How can I explore them in case of logs and metrics? Or also then with DQL in case of events, for instance. I haven't yet mentioned Copilot, the elephant in the room, or I have actually. I said it's the third way, and we also presented it to perform. I can dive into this in a sec. If there is anyone who wants to, let me know via question. But that's the main three ways for Grail. We also showed then how you can contextualize things and use external data in order to enrich it. We added variables to wrap it up and to make it more dynamic. And I think that's the most important thing. So you know how things work and how you can get your dashboards up and shining.
We have a question maybe related to classic dashboards, or we can jump actually, I think, right into the Q&A section. Question to the classic dashboards. Will the classic dashboards be removed or retained when upgraded to the new dashboard? So what happens after you click the upgrade button with the old dashboard?
Nothing. It stays the same way. There is no end of life. We neither publicly nor internally. it's an alternative for now, and it stays. So
it stays
it's
where
just
it
like
is.
a copy in essence. You can see it as a copy, so the original isn't touched, and it's just recreated in a new one. And you can do this as often and as many times as you want. We just always create a new copy, and that's it. Let's
Thanks.
do this.
Scrolling on top of our questions, there's a question from Nuria. How can you visualize all your Grail data you have available? It's a bit general, random question. Maybe you can talk a bit about the data types available in Grail.
Yeah,
And
logs, metrics are, I think, sooner be to BG8 around May, June, if I'm not mistaken. Then this will include also service metrics. That's maybe also a burning question. What else is there? Events are already there for a while. Biz events are there. So logs, metrics, events, biz events, traces are also going out this year. But you can certainly get more from your representative in terms of timelines. But also, I think May, June, if I'm not mistaken. My last information. So then traces is also there. So the main types are there at this point in time.
And when it comes to visualization, you can choose any kind of, I would say, aggregation. So if you're querying metrics, logs, even traces or events, you can use any kind of chart if you are counting those kinds of data or records and visualize it. So there is no restriction there, I would say.
Let me actually jump back to the product to show this maybe, because that's also something we mentioned at before, and I kind of undersell today. Whenever you create now charts, or whenever you fetch data from Grail, doesn't matter which way, then what you get in the visual section is, again, first the types, which now also contain histogram and soon also honeycomb, just as a spoiler. And then what we now provide for each of these types is a mapping section, so that we actually make transparent what's expected from the chart. I mean, from a time series chart here, I think it's very sensible that on the x-axis we would actually expect a time frame. And since we are using a time series here, we already mapped this automatically for you, or in that sense, everything we can map automatically. And then on a Y, usually have any kind of data. Here we call it usage, while we moved it over in the intent, as you can see here. So it's just alias for exactly that metric. And this way you can see and better guess what the structure should be. Once you provide that structure with the result, then you usually can use the respective chart types. And we also indicate whenever you can't, or when you hit that, then we actually also tell you, hey, this is unsuitable, please change it or modify your query. And another spoiler, which will also soonish enter, is then more guidance also around this. For instance, if you are here and you said it before, what about aggregations? For instance, if you're missing a summarize comment, then we would also tell you and guide you better, so that you can more easily switch from one to the other. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I would say it answers the question. Next question, Ravi would know how to show active problems on a dashboard, or how you can pin active problems on a dashboard. Thomas, I have therefore already prepared for you a DQL query, which you can just execute.
At that, or I go one step further, just check out the playground tenant, because I think we have actually a dashboard there prepared for you that you can just take and copy and paste, or take partials, just copy and paste tiles out of it, which I think contains most of the problem related data already prepared with queries.
Maybe you just quickly show us the playground environment. Some of our participants might not know about it.
Yes.
And I can also share the URL to our playground environment.
So that you can hold me accountable. I can see what you're doing, Sini. Is he just talking something, or does it actually exist? It exists. You can see it's called playground. Sini will share the URL. What we do here is at least to the aggregates, but I also think we also have a problem list, exactly. Yeah. So you can see open and closed, and you can then just copy these tiles into your environment, and it should pick up your data. And I hope that helps. So one of the few examples, or the many examples that we have in the Playground tenant.
I think this would have answered the question, and I've shared the link in our chat.
Yep.
Oh, maybe.
By the way, maybe to also answer the question where you can find it, it's actually as easy as going here to your name, because then we have it linked in here, as you can see. So no need to even look it up. It's in your linked from your environments. Same holds true for dashboards and notebooks, if I'm not mistaken, because we also link it in here. So that should be easy to find.
Awesome. There's a question from Alex. You teased it already. When is Honeycomb tile coming to the new dashboards?
I think it's a matter of sprints now. It's safe to say, but I can follow up. But
it's in the works. So within the next couple of real months, you can expect the Honeycomb tile.
Already in implementation, and you can soon expect it.
Thanks. Then we have some other questions. There are just too many questions. There's also a question again from Nuria. Is there a way to move user session queries to the new dashboards? How can you recreate the tiles manually?
I don't have any real news or update there. I gotta be frank. That's something we also internally first need to discuss with the user digital experience folks and colleagues. But as of today, you would first need the data type, because you mentioned data types before, right? And one, I think in our timelines, being one of the rather last is sessions, for instance, and real user monitoring data, which hopefully will enter end of year, beginning of next year, around this timeline. And once you have this there, then you can start to convert. But we haven't, because it's the last, and we first obviously focused on metrics because it's the most important, and now traces. We will then, along these lines, start to think of possibilities to easily transition over.
We have a question about those dynamic filters, dynamic dashboard. So can you show one more time that dynamic dashboard if time allows here? So you have been obviously a bit too quick on the dashboard variables and filters.
Yep, sure. I mean, here you can see it as well. We also have variables defined on this one, on the Playground. Also there you can obviously check things out. Here it's just list-based or comma-separated based, which are obviously cheap because, yeah, you can just define it this way as well. You no need to query any data here.
So this means there are different types of variables you can use. So you can use some predefined set of values. You can use variables based on data you have stored in Grail.
Yes, and let me go back to the most recent version, because there it looks different, to not confuse you. So if we have variables here defined, again, let's create a new one. You give it a name, you give it a type. It's the same as you've seen before. You can use query, which is asking TQL, doing TQL queries. You can use code the same way as you create code tiles. So you can also fetch external data here and populate your dropdowns. You could use lists, which is just, creating a list, as simple as that. Or you could use free text, as you've seen before with the version example, where I can then just put in whatever I want dynamically and then by it filter my tiles. And the way I would have done this, as you've maybe seen before, we said, okay, let's look for versions with 2.1. That's the only one that exists. It showed up because I actually used this variable on top called version that I then have linked in my tile by simply putting this one line here, which says filter everything that contains in the version field the value that has been provided in this dropdown of my version variable. And this way it's linked together.
Thanks. I hope this has answered the question. We have a question from Matt. Is there a way to create a master query in a dashboard and then use the results for the event table in different visualizations? So kind of reusable.
Yes, for single values, you could already use it this way. A thing that we are working on is also being able to hide variables, to truly use these as variables and not just as filter dropdowns. So that's one way in that direction. We then, as a next step, also plan to make them more versatile, meaning to, in essence, be able to better map this and use them in pretty much along these lines that you described, which is then foster reuse, at least for, in that case, for exactly the same data set, because that's then still limited to this, if you think about it. But today, it's only possible with single results. You could do this, yes.
Thanks. Then we have a question. Questions related to all the service metrics. I think you have answered that one already. So all service metrics are not yet in Grail, but they will be soonish available in Grail.
Yes.
So service metrics like response time, like failure rates, and so on.
Yep.
Then let me just check. We have quite some questions.
And what about, I mean, there was one question that I immediately see from Copilot. That's an easy one to answer. Definite timelines. What I can definitely tell is the previous ongoing. If you're interested, just ask your representative, your success manager in that case, or your account executive that you know, and they will then help you getting also into the preview if you're interested. This way you can already use it, and then to further deadlines, I have to refer you to Gabby, the PM for Copilot.
But the main contact person should be the account customer success manager or account executive.
Exactly. Your representative on the Dynatrace side. Yeah.
Thanks. Then we have quite some questions, I think 3 or 4 questions regarding management zones and dashboards. And maybe you can teaser something. So some people have mixed up also the variables with management zones, and maybe to add some clarification. So
yeah. So
all this all will look like.
Sure. Variables you can imagine as being the dynamic filters in the old world, which is on a dashboard by dashboard basis. Management zones is a global concept, as you know, and this will also have its counterpart. And I think I already teased it also the breakouts. There will be another concept that will then replace or make it possible to do similar things when it comes to filtering, also then in the new Dynatrace experience.
So basically, stay tuned. We're working on some filtering replacement when it comes to management zones.
Yep.
Management zone filter.
There will be definitely more communication from Roman Windischhofer.
Yeah. So there will be more coming. Then we have a question. Building related question, maybe. So when exploring logs on a dashboard, is every query build dashboard is refreshed or loaded?
So going back to...
So we're talking just about logs. So when you're exploring logs,
yes, the simple answer is yes. Whenever you use, I think there's 2 things you can do, and maybe I also forgot about that. So it's a good point in time to actually mention that and also differentiate these 2 things. When you work with data, what you also get is usually interactions here, for instance, on a table, either on the row header or on the data itself. And of course, there is many that do not affect building, such as opening something in another app, for instance, but there is interaction that manipulate data. And that would be the same as doing it in DQL or in the builder, in essence, because they're all tied to each other, or the same, you could say even. So for instance, if I here say, let's use another field, for instance here, summarize by status, then yes, this would actually add, as you can see, a new field, or would manipulate the fields. And then this way, also get built because it triggers a query. And that is indicated by this run button, usually. So whenever you hit it, that means you're updating it. Or whenever you're interacting, you add something and we automatically run it. And you update it. And that will affect billing, or that will be built. And you can see all that information in here. So whenever anything is run, we will also surface it up here. And then in the information, we also tell you how much bytes we have scanned, which then can be converted into dollar amounts. And maybe one more thing, metrics, for instance, here are not built. Metrics are for free. That's the difference, because they are so centered to observability that we have two different models here.
Thanks. Let me look at the next question. Now my Zoom Q&A window is gone. Okay. Kenny wants to know, how would I graph out API calls? I have a command, but not sure how to make a graph out of this. So maybe we can do it ad hoc together, and I share with you the starting command, Thomas.
To shortcut it, I would say, please try out the examples. This is exactly how I did it today, for instance. I love in-product things. I mean, you could, of course, also go to the docs page, but what I usually do is I actually go to the example, I place it. Then one way that you could look at this is either in the records. What I then do is I usually go to raw, which then shows me what's actually in this. And then in the raw, you can see the structure. What I did today, when this structure doesn't match with what you have in your API call response, then it's as simple as telling ChatGPT based on an example. Like, for instance, it's an object, it has two different attributes here, and that's now please convert it from the thing that comes from the API to exactly that format. And here, for instance, if you want to have time series, then it's as simple as putting a timestamp and a value in an array, and that's it. And then we automatically convert it internally so that it can actually be visualized as a true line chart in that example.
Yeah, but what Kenny was referring to is not making API calls. It's like he has in system events some API calls as audits, and he would just like to chart it on a time series. So basically making use of the make time series command and count.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, but that's then pretty much what happened also over here in the builder.
Maybe you can do it with...
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do it with any kind of data. So the source is Grail data, a DQL,
Okay,
and
got
you
it.
just...
Yeah, but that's what I in essence said. You can see this exactly here.
Yeah,
this is also just logs, right? And either you do it via build. I mean, it's probably not in logs then. It's in something else. Maybe its own bucket. Here you do it via the UI, but of course you could also do the same. Let's actually just create a new DQL tile out of this.
Exactly.
Then we fed logs, could be anything. And with make time series, you can actually make a time series out of it with a single command.
Exactly. This is what I was looking for.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Thanks. Then we have a question from Matt. I'm not fully sure if I can understand it really. Can you clarify the name of the JavaScript tool, Thomas, you mentioned? Is it a JetGPT? JetGPT, sorry, I'm not a GS coder. So what is the AI tool called you have been using for your helping with your queries?
I mean, it's just a large language model tool, pretty much the most popular as of today, which is ChatGPT. And yeah, I mean, you can obviously go into it if you want. Then it's as simple as posting your, I mean, I could even show you in the example that I had before. For instance, here, as I said, it can be as simple as saying, well, as copy pasting then certain structures out of here. For instance, it could be this part, then you copy paste it, and then you ask ChatGPT to provide you conversions here. So you say, please provide me with a script to go from A in essence, which could be the result structure from an example. So from example to my structure. And then you provide both here in brackets, and it's simple as that in order to give you then code that you can then place in a code tile with this between the export functions. And the first step, The first step is usually to fetch data. Here you can also ask ChatGPT, how can I do a fetch to any API? For instance, open weather, ChatGPT when new. So he provided me with a boilerplate, and I could do this here. Give me a fetch request to openweather.org for API version 2.5, for instance, that I'm using. Then it would be, yeah, gives you the fully fledged example. What you then need to do is you probably need to have a subscription to OpenWeather, which I do. Then you probably need to have an API key in most cases, which you then just fill in here. And then it's as simple as saying copy code, going to Dynatrace again, which was here, and then to replace this. And this way you just in a matter of seconds get the code. You can replace this one value. You replace whatever city you prefer. I would obviously go for Vienna since I'm sitting here. Even though New York is nice too, gotta admit. And then you get the result. And then once from the result, after this first step of fetching, you would usually transform, which is what I mentioned before. You just ask again, ChatGPT in essence. I mean, you can see this here. I already asked a few questions around building stuff. In order to go from one format to the others, you would get the code and you would place it again just here as a second step. Place transform code. And this way you're really fast in actually coming up with working external data. And this is pretty much how I yesterday and today in a matter of 1 hour or so came together with these 6 or 8 tiles that all fetch data from external sources, including questions that I had in order to come around, for instance, the allow listing. But that's it. That's how I did it. And it was fairly fast.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, for the extensive explanation. Unfortunately, we are already at the end of our time slot. I would thank everyone for joining the session and for your questions. And I hope we could shed some light on how to use dashboards. And many thanks to Thomas joining the session and leading it.
You know where to find me, either in the community or via email. Some of you already have direct access to me. Yeah, reach out whenever there's something missing, unclear, or something we should know of.
So you can reach out to everyone in the Dynatrace community, so community.dynatrace.com. I think we have a dedicated dashboards section.
Yeah.
So for any further follow-up questions, please go there. Yeah, many thanks. And Thomas, and for everyone who is watching, have a nice day, guys. And see you in our next office hours, which are scheduled for the beginning of May, if I remember correctly. Then many thanks and have a nice day.
You too.
Bye.